big at the time. So I made like Angry Bees, Angry Bears, Angry whatever, all these kind of copy apps, but it wasn't a great job in that sense, because you were kind of seeing people who would remortgage their house, expecting that they'll make millions on an app because they saw somebody do that on TV. Basically get disappointed when the only person who downloaded their game were their friends and family. But it did get me very good at making apps, and I did really understand how to get terrible apps approved by Apple in the App Store. And then all of a sudden, one customer came in and said he wanted us to kind of make a Bitcoin app, and I had never heard of Bitcoin at the time. So I learned about Bitcoin to make this app. And then I started, oh, well, this Bitcoin, it's money that you can program. I can send money around like I can send data with any API. So I actually made a Bitcoin wallet, was the first thing I made. And this is the time that all wallets were taken off the App Store. So my wallet was the only wallet on iOS at the time. So that kind of blew up, and I was the only developer with a Bitcoin wallet in the App Store. And then eventually Apple allowed wallets back on the App Store, and I very quickly realized I didn't want to be in the wallet business, because making a wallet is a thankless job, right? You're kind of basically responsible for the security of people's money, but nobody wants to pay for a wallet, right? So I very quickly kind of shut it down when other wallets came into the space and people can make wallets. But at the time I was making a game. Had to make a game for my job because Apple had released a new programming language called Swift. So I had to learn that to kind of keep up with the best programming practices. And I saw somebody had posted a Medium article or something saying like they had made Flappy Bird in this new programming language, and they showed you how they made it. So it's kind of a good tutorial to learn this new language. So I downloaded the Flappy Bird repo and I started to play around with it. And then I kind of had this code base for a game. And people will know that Flappy Bird is like an 8-bit style. And then I thought, well, I need to change it a little bit. So I changed it. I changed it into a rocket, a lunar lander style game. And then I tried that with some friends, and people didn't like it. The aim of the game was you had to kind of cut the screen and make the rocket fly, and you'd run out of fuel and you had to land, like basic lunar lander type game. It was a bit boring. So then I changed it to a monkey. At the time, I think I was watching Naruto a lot. And so I got the name Sarutobi from that. And and instead of making a lunar lander land, you had to make this monkey fly. And I'd also had learned this new Bitcoin skill, how to use Bitcoin in games, in apps. So I decided, I've got this game, my games didn't really take off. I know if I put this on the App Store, nobody will download it. So I've got to do something different. I know I'll add Bitcoin payments to the game so people can buy things in the game with like Bitcoin. So I did that. I sent it to Apple, and Apple rejected it. Apple rejected it because basically, if you want to purchase game items or in-app purchases, you have to use the Apple in-app purchase mechanism. You can't use some third-party way of doing it. So then I thought, well, they have this rule against getting Bitcoin from a player, but they don't have a rule about giving Bitcoin to the player. Because why would they have a rule for that? And why would anybody want to give money to a player? But I just really, really wanted to put Bitcoin in the game, just to kind of, because it was fun and interesting, and just because I knew that it could give me that kind of niche or an edge, that might get picked up by news articles and these kind of things. So I did that. Apple almost rejected it, but then they kind of said, well, we can't really reject it because it's not against the rules, but it seems wrong. Anyway, they approved it. And then I had this game which people could play, and it could send Bitcoin to them. And that got picked up by the CoinDesk and Reddit and all the Bitcoin that was given to players was basically from the community. I put a QR code on Reddit and I said, if you send Bitcoin to this QR code, it will send it to people. And it's just a great way to kind of make Bitcoin go mainstream. So that's basically how Sarutobi started. See what I've got on my slides here. Oh yeah, this is a little disclaimer here. I'm not sure if people remember this episode of The Simpsons. Sometimes when I talk, I might sound a bit arrogant, like I did it first, I'm the first person who did this, and I apologize for that in advance. I didn't mean to give that impression. Because it's quite hard to say like who did stuff first, because like people made Bitcoin games before me for sure, you know, but some people get picked up on it and some people don't, and is what it is kind of thing. Yeah, and this is like a little timeline that I'm going to go through a little bit on kind of like what games we had in Bitcoin. So I said like there were games before Sarutobi. Namely, the first game was actually built into the Bitcoin D. So the Bitcoin node software itself was added there by Satoshi, and it was Bitcoin Poker. Well, apparently it didn't work and it got taken out. But, you know, Satoshi kind of had it in mind that we can actually have games with Bitcoin. And what a lot of people who are into historical NFTs, a few people have been sharing on Twitter that Hal Finney, who could be Satoshi, if not, he was, you know, he's the second person to Satoshi, was also talking about using Bitcoin for tradable baseball cards. And this is like, what, 2009, 10, kind of, you know, very early on, people had the idea so they could have collectibles on the Bitcoin blockchain. After that, there was a game called Satoshi's Dice, which is like a gambling dice game that was very popular. And then my game, Sarutobi, came out, and Spells of Genesis. So I'll talk about that a little bit. How, because Sarutobi originally was just Bitcoin, but then we kind of started to play it around with NFTs. And that's because of my collision with Shaban from Spells of Genesis. This is some slides that I have. Yes, sorry, like this presentation's from a presentation I give to game developers, but it's a slide which kind of shows that people always played games with money. You know, hundreds of years ago, you'd play dice games and you'd have some coins or cash just to make the games a bit more fun. And this is an incident in Japan where people would gambling and playing games with money was quite popular, so the shogun banned it. However, a company made these secret playing cards, which you can see at the top, called flower cards, or hanafuda in Japanese. And they made these as a secret way that people could kind of play games with money without the shogun realizing. And the company that did this was actually Nintendo. So Nintendo started making kind of illegal secret gambling cards so people could continue to play games for money. And like their first customer was basically the Yakuza. So that's kind of, you know, I always found that quite interesting that Nintendo kind of started making games with money. And then when they actually released Mario, they kept the money in the games. You get coins, but you couldn't actually get real coins in the digital world because that was impossible. You know, in the physical world, people could play with their cards to get coins and cash and money, but in the digital world, that was impossible. You know, until we kind of got digital ways to do money in games, but you know, you couldn't really. It wasn't like cash. You basically could like buy things with like PayPal and in-app purchases, but you know, it wasn't really peer-to-peer cash. And then eventually, when Bitcoin came out, it enables us to kind of basically play games and pass coins around that have value instantly. So this kind of was the history of Sarutobi, kind of bringing coins and money back into games, you know, just to make the game a bit more fun, you know, like even with Sarutobi, it's not gambling because you don't have to pay anything, but the fact that you get a coin that is worth something just makes the game a bit more spicy, a bit more interesting. So yeah, Apple approves it, then Apple banned the game. This is how early Sarutobi looked. This was like the public pot. It says 2.3 Bitcoin. That was the community donations, and people could send more Bitcoin to that pot. And when you played the game, after a while, it would send you 100 bits, which is a small amount of Bitcoin. People don't use bits anymore. We use sats now, which is even smaller amount. But that's kind of how it looked very early on. And interestingly, even some hackers sent money to the public pot. So Bitstamp exchange was hacked, and the hacker actually sent some funds to the game, and that game then sent the funds out in tiny amounts to people who played it. So that's all quite interesting. And these are just some things from the articles. Yeah, so this is kind of like the first kind of Bitcoin game. So this is, obviously people who know more about the historical NFT space will probably know about other games, other people doing projects at the time. But in my kind of sphere, these were the kind of the games I kind of saw. BitQuest was one, a Minecraft Bitcoin server. I also brought out another game, which some people might know, called Game of Birds, which I still think you can download, but the Bitcoin doesn't work in it anymore. And I also brought out a game, Takra, which I'll get onto in a little bit. But yeah, anyway, tokens in games. So when did the tokens come into it? So counterparty. So I was in Australia, and because of the success of Sarutobi, I was able to quit my day job, and me and my girlfriend, we moved back to Japan, and I went to the Tokyo Bitcoin meetup. And I had only, when I was in Australia, there weren't any Bitcoin meetups at the time, so I didn't really, I spoke to people online, but, I wasn't really in the community at all. But when I went back to Tokyo, there was, I think, kind of like the first or second Bitcoin meetup was the Tokyo Bitcoin meetup, and it was hosted at the first one I went to was hosted at the Austrian embassy. So it's like really fancy place, and there were loads of people there, and I was surprised that people actually knew me there. I had a Sarutobi t-shirt on, and I remember one person saying, "Hey, I love the Sarutobi t-shirt," and then they realized that I had made it, and they're like, "Oh my god, I didn't know that the creator was coming here." And apparently, people knew about the game, so that was nice. And then at that meetup, the organizer of the meetup, Ken Shido, he introduced me to a couple of guys who were making a counterparty wallet. So he said that I should talk to them. He was very much in the mode of like matchmaking people and trying to get like people in the Bitcoin space to talk and make companies, this kind of stuff. So I met Koji Higashi and Yuta Hoshino, and they were telling me that this thing that you can do on Bitcoin, where you can make tokens, and these tokens can represent a bunch of different things. So this was counterparty. At the time, counterparty was very hard to use. You had to use the web wallet. There's no like mobile app to do it. So they had made a company called IndieSquare, where they were developing a mobile wallet that let you basically, you could issue or mint counterparty tokens on your phone, and you could hold them on your phone. And this was a pretty big deal because there was no way to do that, right? Tokens had existed. I think there were other blockchains which did it. There was a few different protocols, Mastercoin, which is now Omni. But it wasn't really easy for the normal person to do it. So yeah, they wanted to make a wallet to make it easy, and they wanted, they were asked if I would help out because I was an app developer. So I started work developing the IndieSquare mobile wallet, which basically, by today's standards, it's probably a terrible wallet. But we didn't have any competition, I suppose. So it was the only way. It's only like NFT wallet on mobile in existence at the time, but it worked. People, whilst they were on the bus or on the train, they could basically just think of assets they wanted to issue and issue them. Yes, this is kind of how it works. So on the left is the counterparty web wallet, which looks exactly the same today than it did in 2014, albeit it's got support for different types of Bitcoin addresses and some more features. And on the right was the IndieSquare wallet that we made. And you can see I've got my, I can hold my Bitcoin there. can hold my XCP token, bit crystals, and then I've got CMP cards, CMP coin. So you can kind of see, like, back in the day with Counterparty, there wasn't this concept of NFT. The word NFT hadn't existed, but if you wanted to make a non-fungible token, you'd basically issue a token with an issuance of 1. But people didn't really do that too much. People would issue a token with maybe 200 to make it rare. So it was fungible within that 200. But we were just playing around with it. Nobody really knew what it was used for. Counterparty originally, I think I have a slide here. It was originally designed for kind of stocks and shares, and